Welcome back to another episode of Real Results with Coach Joe. I'm your host, Coach Joe Villegas. This is the program where we help you to improve your health, increase your wealth, and live a more fulfilling life. And I am super excited today because my guest is going to be helping us with that third pillar of living a more fulfilling life. This very special guest is not only an author of the book Blank Canvas, How I Reinvented My Life After Prison. He is a reinvention architect and is here to share a ton of value with us today. Craig, I'm so excited to have you on. Welcome to the show.
Joe, thank you so much for having me. We've spoken a couple of times before we're recording, and our conversations have been incredible. So I'm really looking forward to today.
I'm pumped, and I know the viewers are going to see the exact same thing we are. They're going to get a ton of value out of this and have a lot of fun as well. Now, Craig, you have an incredible story. I mean, you've been, for lack of a better term, to the edge and back, as it were, and you have a lot to share. And I want to make sure that we touch on as much of that today in this program as we can. If it's cool with you, I want to jump right in. I want to hear your story. Let's share that, get it to the viewers, and we can give them all the rich insights that you have to share.
Absolutely. So to tell the story, to really, really tell the story, we're going to have to jump in our time machine DeLorean and go back in time a little bit.
Let's do it.
We're going to go back to September 30th, 2013. So on September 30th, 2013, I had what most people would say was it all. I had an amazing career as a senior enterprise account executive for a major technology firm. I owned 4 homes. I drove the nice cars. I had VIP status at the finest restaurants in Greenwich, Connecticut, wore the 5-figure watches. I was married. I mean, I had, like I said, it all. And then on October 1st, 2013, I was 2 weeks into my brand new job. I had just started, our biggest competitor wooed me away with an aggressive pay package. And I drove from my home to Connecticut to my brand new office in New York City. And I'm setting up my desk for the day like we all would. And I put my laptop down, I put my notebook down, put my pen down, and I grabbed my phone out of my pocket. And I'm confused because there's a missed call and a voicemail on there. And I'm thinking, who called me at 8:45 in the morning on Tuesday? This is so weird.
Right.
So I put the phone to my ear and this is what I hear. Mr. Stanland, this is Special Agent McTiernan with the FBI. We are at your residence and have a warrant for your arrest. You need to call us and come home immediately, or we will issue a warrant with the federal marshals.
Oh my gosh.
October 1st, 2013 is the day that I lost it all.
Wow, I got chills when you said that. Like the hair on the back of my neck is standing up. So intense. So what was going through your mind in that moment, Craig? Like hearing that voicemail, knowing like, hey, it's not just a hop, skip, and a step to get back home and get this sorted out. Like what was going through your mind at that time?
That's a great question. So, I took the elevator up 37 floors to get to my office. Well, my heart and stomach fell those 37 floors. I mean, they were, at my feet. It was like all oxygen left the room. I was having trouble breathing.
Wow.
I actually thought that voicemail, it's going to sound silly, but I thought that voicemail was broadcast through the office PA system. I don't think the office even had a PA system, but I thought all of my brand new colleagues knew that I was wanted by the FBI. It was like there was a neon sign flashing at me.
Right.
And amid all of that turmoil, my heart spoke and said, I told you so. And it was, without a doubt, one of the most terrifying moments of uncertainty I've ever experienced.
Wow. I mean, that's so raw. I mean, I can't even imagine. And to your point, right, you must have been thinking like, okay, every one of my colleagues got the email. They know what's going on with me right now, right? So what's going through your mind must have been, I mean, unimaginable for most people, like that kind of panic that sets in at that time. So if you would, Craig, like walk us through like what happened? I mean, people don't just get calls from the FBI like that every day, thankfully, right? But what led to that point where, up to September 30th, I mean, you're crushing it by anyone's standard, really. And then within that 24-hour span, it all kind of comes crashing down. Like what brought you to that point? What happened?
So we're going to go back about 10 months before October 1st. And we'll even go back a little bit further. Let's go back about 14 months before October 1st, 2013.
Sure. Let's do it.
So I was very successful. I was always ranked number 1, 2, or 3 in the company for a long time. However, the market that I was in, the products I was selling were becoming more and more commoditized. So the margins on my deals were shrinking.
Right.
So my paychecks were getting smaller. Number 2, I fell in love with the lifestyle. I had started dating somebody at the time who eventually became my wife. And I showed her this incredible lifestyle of the Christian Louis Vuittons and the Jimmy Choos,
Right.
walking up and down Greenwich Avenue, having champagne lunches, doing all these things. Well, the key point about that is this was all taking place in the middle of the week, not on the weekends like most people might go
Right.
out and have a little bit of fun.
Right.
I was doing this in the middle of the week, and I served some of the largest financial institutions in the world, the largest banks, the largest hedge funds, and they demand a certain level of respect and attention, and I wasn't giving it to them. So my paychecks started to shrink. Well, I had never actually thought that I was worthy. I never thought that I was enough. I always felt like an imposter. And so that lifestyle, that actually became who I was, who I thought I needed to be in my marriage, in life in general. And so with those paychecks shrinking, my identity is getting threatened.
Right.
Who I am as a human, as a man,
Right.
is being threatened. And I've got to figure this out, and I've got to figure this out quickly. Well, I started at the bottom of the company, which means that I knew exactly how all the systems and processes of our partner company worked.
Okay.
And I figured out how to exploit their warranty policy for my financial gain.
Wow.
So I started, and I'll tell you that I think this is an important part of the
Sure,
story.
please, yeah.
It took me months to put this fraud together. It took me months. I look like Russell Crowe from A Beautiful Mind. Remember that movie when he had Post-it notes everywhere?
Yeah,
I mean, I had Post-it notes all over the place. I had, journals filled with notes. I looked like a lunatic.
Wow.
So 4 months of putting this fraud together, and finally, the final puzzle piece comes in, right? And I'm sitting at my dining room table. I worked from home before everybody was forced to work from home.
Right.
And I hovered my finger over the mouse button to hit send to initiate the fraud. And I thought about it. And that heart that when I was arrested said, "I told you so,"
Right.
this was actually the first time it spoke. And it said, "Stop, don't do this.
Yeah.
This is not the way for you."
Wow.
And I lifted my finger off the mouse and I thought about it. And I thought about having this courageous conversation with myself, with my wife, with my family, to say that I can't afford our lifestyle anymore.
Right.
And I don't want to do this anymore. And I thought about it. That would mean that I was being seen as less than.
Right.
And that terrified me. And so I hit the send button and initiated the fraud.
Wow.
That landed me in prison. I ran it for about 10 and a half months before I got that voicemail.
Wow, that is wild. It's crazy, Craig. When we talk, and I work with clients myself, and typically people will come to me to work with me out of two reasons, right? Inspiration or desperation. And it sounds like for where you were, I mean, you were fully in, knee deep or even higher of desperation to make sure that you were staying congruent with your identity, right? Which was this material world, it sounded like, and making enough money to keep this lifestyle afloat that led you to do this. I mean, that is just, it just sounds so intense. So like what it took to lead you to that point. So you sent this email. I mean, your conscience is telling you no, and you push through anyway. What was that 10 months like? I mean, were you just on edge looking over your shoulder the whole time? Like, what was that like when you were just executing this fraud for months on end?
Very intuitive question. So I have a hard time watching Goodfellas, particularly the scene at the end when Ray Liotta is coked out of his mind. The babysitter forgot her lucky hat. The brother has to stir the sauce. Remember that scene at the end?
Yep.
And how I've never done coke before in my life, not my thing whatsoever.
Right.
But the frenetic energy in that scene strikes something very deep and intrinsic. It brings me back to that 10 and a half months.
Wow.
Uncut Gems with Adam Sandler is another one. That entire movie is frenetic energy.
Sure.
And it hits that raw spot inside of me. So for all of that time, I knew what I was doing was wrong. That voice that said, "Stop, don't do this, this is not the way." My fraud required thousands of choices to perpetuate it for that 10 and a half months. It is not an exaggeration to say each and every one of them was made in the face of my heart saying, "Stop, don't do this. This is not the way."
Wow.
I was lying to myself, was lying to my wife at the time, and I was lying to my family.
Yeah.
And I was lying to my employer as well. All of that was just this there were so many plates spinning, and trying to keep them up was maddening to me. It was absolutely, it was so stressful. And what I think is amazing was every so often I think about having that conversation, stopping the fraud,
Right.
having that conversation with myself and with my wife at the time, saying, I can't do this. That little conversation scared me more than everything I just told you.
Yeah, I mean, I can imagine, right? It's tough. The person that you love the most, right, that you sleep next to at night, how do you tell that person, hey, honey, this lifestyle that you love so much is just not going to be there soon. It's going to be gone, right? And the only way to kind of keep it afloat is to do what you were doing. I know on our first time getting to talk together, we had talked about this concept of the messages that you get when it's time to make a shift and do something different, and they sort of come in waves. And the metaphor we used was the feather, the brick, or the bus. And it sounds like the feather was that little tap on your shoulder, hey, it's time to wrap this up, don't do it, don't send the email. And the bus was that call from the FBI. And all this is going in between that 10 months. So, man, it's just so intense. So let's fast forward, Craig. So you get this phone call from the FBI. What do you do? You race home? Like what happened next? I want to make sure we kind of get through all this in the story here.
So I absolutely do. I collect my car from the garage.
Wow.
I was embarrassed to pick the car up. I told the guy I was going to be 9 hours,
Right.
because I was there for the day, right? So he probably buried it in the back of the lot.
Right.
And here I am 15 minutes later collecting the cars. I was embarrassed by that. But I start the drive home, and I'm freaking out, obviously. Mm-hmm. But my mind, and I think this is so funny how we deal with trauma and how our mind tries to seek a solution to something.
Right.
I'm thinking, you know what, this is just a misunderstanding. I'll get home, I'll sit down for some coffee with the FBI, and we'll sort it out. Right. I was thinking I had enough charm or enough charisma that I could talk my way out of this situation.
If only.
I knew that I was lying to myself even then.
Right.
I was able to secure legal representation on the way home, which was a miracle.
Right.
And I called home to my wife to find out what I was driving into. Mm-hmm. And she answered after 7 excruciatingly long rings. I mean, they were the longest rings I've ever experienced.
Wow.
And she picked up the phone with a voice that was one of sheer terror. And all she could say was, Craig, what's happening?
Right.
And I couldn't answer her. I knew it had caught up with me,
right.
But I didn't know what was going on in the house.
Man.
And she just told me, they're in the house. There are about 15 of them. They're executing a search warrant. When are you coming home?
Right.
I said, I'll be an hour or so. So I had an hour to think about it on that drive home, and just to try to put together a semblance of a plan when I was driving into such uncertainty that plan had no grip in reality.
Right. I mean, you're probably just trying to rationalize your situation, right? And make sense of what you can't make sense of in that moment, other than, I mean, really kind of your higher self telling the whole time, don't do it, don't do it. And the back of your mind knowing full well, hey, I did that. Now it's time to pay the man, right? So you get home. I mean, you probably pull up to what looks like madness at your house. What was that experience like?
That was insanity. It looked like a movie scene. So I lived in a gated community. I drive through the gates, take the right-hand turn down the hill. That's when it came into view.
Wow.
It looked exactly like a movie. There were unmarked cars. There was a SWAT vehicle there. There were local police cars from my town and the neighboring towns, which I thought was strange.
Wow.
Because everybody wanted in on the action.
Right.
And I remember as I'm coming down the hill, they see my car, they knew what I drove, and they immediately pointed to me, and they used their bodies kind of as a shield, if you will, and they guided me into a parking spot.
Wow.
And as I was coming into that spot, I remember thinking to myself, wow, they really do wear those blue jackets with the yellow lettering on the back. Isn't that crazy? Like I see in the movies.
Right.
Again, funny things that go through your mind.
Yeah, sure.
And I get out of the car, empty my pockets, they frisk me, and that's when they pulled out the cuffs.
Wow.
And when they pulled out the cuffs, I looked at them, and you could probably see through the camera, but I'll tell everybody, I'm 5'4". At the time, I'm 140 pounds, right? So I'm not a large individual by any stretch. And I say, look at him, look at me. I'm not a threat. You don't have to handcuff me.
Right.
And he says, it's procedure. turn around. When I turn around, I happen to look up and I see my neighbor, Carl, who's 70 something years old.
Right.
And we make eye contact. And he ducks behind the curtain as if he was a 7-year-old boy.
Oh my
that he
gosh.
did something wrong, that he saw something he shouldn't have seen.
Wow.
And then the cuffs went on my wrists. They were colder and heavier than I would have ever thought or expected.
Wow.
And that was really when the severity of the situation landed, because I felt so helpless. If you've never been in handcuffs, it's one of the most hopeless and helpless I think that we can feel.
Yeah, I can't imagine. Now, Craig, I mean, I'm on the edge of my seat listening to the story, I mean, firsthand from the man himself. I know we got to take a quick break here to hear from our sponsors, but when we come back, I want to dive into, I mean, your time through prison, and then be able to share with folks, you know, what real fulfillment can look like in their life and the lessons you've learned. So let's hold this thought for just a second, and we're going to hear from a commercial break from our sponsors.
Hi, this is Chris Wilhelm, and I'm excited to be bringing you a new show this spring on RVN Television called All Things South Jersey. Well, we'll be taking a look at people who have made South Jersey their home, as well as a look at our boroughs, our towns, and our cities. The show will air on Wednesdays and Saturdays at 2:30, and if you're not available, you can pull it up on RVN Television platform on demand, as well as Roku, Apple TV, and Fire Stick. Hope to see you soon.
I love that we both got an awesome network and save money doing it.
I know, $25. I love that it's guaranteed for 3 years.
Hey, we're sitting on a sign here.
Switch and get Welcome Unlimited for $25 a line, guaranteed for 3 years. Verizon.
There's an old expression in business that you can't manage what you can't measure. Business performance and business valuation, it's all measured by the numbers. But I've learned that the real lessons and the tough decisions that are made occur behind the numbers. My name is Dave Bookbinder. Join me and my guests as we go behind the numbers to understand what really matters most in business.
Hi, I'm Darlene,
And I'm Joe, and we're your new hosts at Let's Talk on RVN Television.
and we're going to have a really exciting and fun-filled show with guests in every walk of life.
So join us every Thursday afternoon at 2 o'clock and every Friday evening at 5:30.
So see you then.
Oh, okay. Easy does it.
We switched to Liberty Mutual and saved $652. They customize your car insurance, so you only pay for what you need. With the money we saved, we thought we'd try electric unicycles. Careful, babe. Saving was definitely easier.
Hey, babe, I think I got it. It's actually...
Okay, show off. Oh. Only pay for what you need.
Hi, this is Chris Wilhelm, and I'm excited to be bringing you a
Welcome back to Real Results. With me today, I have Craig Stanland. And if you missed the first half, which would be very unfortunate, go back now and watch it, because we are on the edge of our seats as Craig is sharing his story. Now, Craig, where we left off, you're outside your house. It looks like a movie scene. There's FBI everywhere. They have the blue and yellow jacket on, like you mentioned. You just got handcuffed. I mean, super intense part of your life. Let's fast forward a bit to what it was like to then go into prison and what that experience is like. So if we can, let's jump right into that.
Yeah, we'll jump right into prison. And, you know, I think it's important to mention that I went to a federal prison camp. So I was with other white-collar offenders and nonviolent drug offenders. And, I was very fortunate that my safety was never a concern. It's still prison, mind you.
Right.
But what I found was my prison, my sense of torture was the mental prison of shame. I was ensconced in shame because my heart had told me thousands of times, stop, don't do this, this is not the way, and I ignored it. I experienced so much shame from that, and I ended up getting divorced because I lied to my wife, and I think that trust is one of the foundational components of any relationship, and I completely smashed that, and I really destroyed her life as well. And I hurt my family and I hurt society. And the weight of that shame it ended up being so torturous. And I think the best way to explain how bad it is and my journey to rock bottom was, well, I'll tell you what happened. I started meditating in prison. I always wanted to, never said, I always said I didn't have the time.
Right.
Plenty of time in prison.
Yeah, for sure.
Plenty of time. So I start meditating. One day during meditation, my mind shows me a short film of what my own suicide would look like.
Wow.
And it was me in one of the basements of the houses that I owned. And I walk in and I sit on a chair. I pull out a pistol, put it in my mouth. And I won't get too gratuitous here.
Sure.
I think everybody can fill in the blanks. And it was so disturbing and so raw that I did what any of us would do. I shook it off and said, I don't want to think about that.
Wow.
And I thought it was so strange, and my mind showed me that.
Right.
Well, the next day when I sat down to meditate, it showed me the short film again, but now it played it a couple of times. And so I waved it off. Then the third time I sat down to meditate, it played it even more. Then that short film of what my own suicide would look like played every second of every single day for 4 months straight.
Wow.
It got to the point where I could actually feel the gun in my mouth. I could feel the bullet exiting the back of my brain. And that's when I started to plan how I was going to kill myself. And I couldn't share any of this with anybody in prison.
Right.
Because if you mention suicide in prison, they lock you in solitary confinement.
Right.
And here I am alone at rock bottom with the man who was responsible for everything. And I hated that man.
Yeah.
And the idea of being locked in isolation with him scared the hell out of me.
Right.
So I just bottled it up inside. I couldn't send it through email because emails are monitored. I couldn't tell anybody on the phone. Phone calls are monitored. And I met some of the nicest people in prison, and I couldn't share with them because they might tell a guard, and I find myself in solitary.
Wow.
So I just bottled it up, and I started planning my suicide. And then one Wednesday, I get an email from my best friend of over 30 years. His name is Sean. Just says one thing. It says, hey man, can I come for a visit this weekend? And I say, yes, you can, because the visiting room's not monitored.
Right.
And I can share with him this vision that I've been having and that I'm not in a good place. Well, Joe, it takes forever for Saturday to arrive.
Sure.
But it finally does. And my friend walks into the visiting room, we hug, and that hug feels so good because there's no touch really in prison. So to have that human connection was absolutely amazing.
Right.
And I can't tell you how excited I am to get this demon out of me, to share this with Sean. And we sit down in our seats, we start kind of eating our food. And I open my mouth to speak, to share with him, to finally release it. And can you believe it? He cuts me off. He starts telling me about his life. He's getting a divorce. He's got money issues. He's got work issues. There's a sadness in my friend's voice and in his eyes that in our 30 plus years of friendship, I've never seen or heard. And so if October 1st, 2013 was the day that my life changed, Sean's visit was the day that my life changed again.
Wow.
Because in that moment, I realized I had worth and I had value outside of all the things that I thought made me worthy and made me valuable.
Right.
I was a friend and nothing more. That one little instance completely changed my life.
I mean, that's amazing. You go from this place of really any sort of certainty in your life is absolutely shattered. I mean, you're at the lowest of low, just sitting in shame, and your best friend of 30 years brings you out and gives you almost like a new, in a way, a new lease on life. You have a new title, a new responsibility to be his friend and be there for him. I mean, what a gift to be able even just to give your ear to listen to what he has to say and bring you up out of that. I mean, how did that feel?
It was absolutely incredible. And what I think is most amazing about this is after he shared, we start talking about, what Rob's up to, what Jason's up to, what Chris is doing. And we just go back to being the 30 plus year friends that we are.
Right.
Joe, I never shared with him that I was having those thoughts because I didn't even need to.
And
that's how impactful that was. It was a pinpoint of light in what had been a sea of darkness.
Wow.
And I'll tell you, the next morning when I woke up, I did have that new lease on life. I was still in prison.
Right.
It wasn't roses and unicorns,
Sure.
like that.
Right.
I was still in prison, but I realized at that point that I had to give meaning
Yep.
to the suffering I had caused to my now ex-wife, to my family, to society, and that was that impetus to reinvent my life.
Wow. I mean, That's amazing. I mean, he was your lighthouse in a way, right? Guided you out of that darkness. That's absolutely incredible. And I think that's a great segue, Craig, because I want to start getting into, the other side of the hill now, where, you're obviously going through prison, you're doing this stuff. Now you've kind of, clawed your way out of the lowest of low in your life. I mean, where did it go from there? Like, how did you begin to reinvent yourself while still being in prison?
So that was, I'll tell you, what I've realized was pre-prison, I was a chaser of things to be happy and to be accepted. Post-prison, I'm a creator of meaning.
Love that.
And my personal reinvention was from that of a chaser to a creator. And that process has taken 3 very distinct steps for me. And number 1 started when I was in prison, and that was connection. And what I mean by that was connecting with myself and understanding what my values are, what I stand for, what I want to do with my life, what do I want to create in my life, getting crystal clear clarity on all of those things that, when I was chasing all of those things, chasing's an interesting thing. Not only are we chasing after something, we're also moving away from something. And I was moving away from my true self. Because the fact is, I always wanted to write. I always wanted to create. I always wanted to invent. But I was too afraid to do those things. And so by chasing, I was running away from my true self. And in prison, I had the opportunity to come back to myself. And so that was the first component of my reinvention.
I mean, that's incredible. And I think for people listening, right, we've all been there where you have this voice inside you that's speaking and you got to listen to it, right? At least the best you can. But I think what's really special about your story, Craig, is it's not only like you sort of ignored that voice, right, to make other decisions, but that energy, right, is now behind your true self, and you have a story to share, and you have these insights to now go and contribute to others, which is incredible, and may not have been there had you just followed your conscience in the first place, right? So, I think it's interesting to note that. I don't know how you feel about it, but.
I absolutely do. I wouldn't be where I am. You and I wouldn't be having this amazing conversation had I not done the things that I had done, if I had not made the choices.
For sure. And so let's get into a little bit for the viewers here, because I know we don't have a ton of time, unfortunately. But for the viewers that are watching, I mean, how can they, like, maybe they're at a low point in their life. They're hearing your story and go, holy cow, like, that resonates with me. How can I start to make the shift in my own life? So, are there some frameworks from your experience, Craig, that we can use to impart on the viewers and help them to make that shift and bring more meaning into their life?
Step number 1 is to express yourself. And you can do that through either journaling or having a conversation with your equivalent of a Sean, but not allowing it to remain bottled up inside. And if there's any embarrassment in sharing your story with somebody, that's why journaling is so great. I started journaling in prison. 10 years later, I do not miss a day. It's that important to me. Because if we can't be honest with ourselves on paper by ourselves, how are we going to ever move out of where we are? We've got to take what's inside and we've got to get it out. So that is, I think, step number 1. Number 2 is getting crystal clear on those values. What do we stand for? No more, I have 7 values, no more than 7, because I really think that, you start doing that, it becomes diluted. Everything becomes a value, and it's very hard to embody them when you have too many. But to me, those are just 2 very elemental steps in this process.
Yeah, I love that. I think the metaphor, find your Sean, I think that's a great takeaway for the day, right? Whether it's journaling or it's a friend, or maybe it's getting on your phone and making videos and going back and watching yourself, whatever it might be, find your Sean. Hashtag, that's a new hashtag, find your Sean. And then on top of that.
I love that. I'm going to use that.
Let's do it. Yeah, I'll put it on my post as well. And then from there is defining your values. And I think what's really important, and as you say, you're a creator. Everybody's a creator, is creating your own values. You're not stuck to your story. I mean, you're only stuck to your past if you live there, right? So for those of you watching, I mean, you can define what your values are and what they mean to you. And from there, Craig, so let's say somebody goes through, they find their Sean, they go through and they define their values. How do you begin to integrate that into your life and make it a daily habit?
So that becomes, to me, that was the second step, is that creation. Is taking what's inside and creating something of meaning. creating something that serves something more significant than ourselves.
Yes.
Because I really do believe that, you know, we think that we want happiness, but what we want is meaning. We want our lives to have meaning. We want our lives to have fulfillment. And we do that. One of the ways we can do that is by connecting to a mission more significant than ourselves and committing to consistently taking creative action, whether that be writing, whether that be learning, whether that be volunteering at a soup kitchen, whatever it may be, but being deliberately consistent with our actions to serve that mission. And then the third part of that, you already touched on it, is that contribute, is that giving back, is taking whatever it is that we create and giving it back so that we do fulfill that service to the mission.
I think that's fantastic. And I really think, I mean, you could almost start at any point in that, right? Connect with yourself, create this life that you want, and then be able to go and contribute and give back, you know, what it is you've now developed with inside of you. Craig, I know we're coming up on time pretty soon, but are there any other, you know, like tips or strategies or tactics that you've found to be helpful, you know, maybe more recently in your life that somebody could take away today and start executing on?
So what I would say is one key thing to remember. You already touched on this, but your past cannot define you without your consent.
Yes.
So that is a key takeaway from all of this. And number two, build that self-trust. Self-trust is what makes us leap boldly into the unknown, because self-trust is not the faith that everything is going to work out okay. Self-trust is the deep innate wisdom of no matter how things turn out, we know we'll be okay. And one of the key steps to building that self-trust is making and keeping commitments to ourselves and to others, because we become the person who does what they say they are going to do. And when we do that, we build that self-trust. So when we take the leap into creating, when we take the leap into contributing and sharing our creation with the world, which can be terrifying, we know, regardless of how that is received by others, which is out of our control, we know that we'll be okay.
I love
so that's
that.
what I would say is the key step to that.
I love that. And I think that's a great place for us to wrap up. I mean, Craig, you've got an incredible story. I mean, something that's pretty much unfathomable to most people. And you've really gone through a pretty incredible journey. But out of that comes amazing insight and amazing contribution to the world at large. And I know viewers will get a lot out of this episode. So for all of you watching, make sure you go find your Sean. That's a new takeaway. I'm going to start using that as much as I can. So Craig, where can folks find you if they want to get a copy of your book, Blank Canvas, or they want to connect with you? Where can they get a hold of you?
Blank Canvas is available on Amazon and barnesandnoble.com. You can connect with me on craigstanland.com. I'm also on LinkedIn and Instagram, adding value every single day. So come check me out. I would love to hear from you.
Awesome. Craig, thanks so much for coming on the episode. And for those of you watching, thank you for tuning in, and we'll see you on the next episode of Real Results.